Financial gains of West Africa during the Transatlantic Slave Trade. Imagine a region with vast forests of gold, rivers that glittered with commerce, and palaces fueled by trade, but trade built on human lives. Imagine kingdoms whose wealth rose not from mining or manufacturing, but from a brutal global system they could neither fully control nor fully escape. And now imagine this. Many people believe West Africa was only a victim in the transatlantic slave trade, crushed, exploited, and drained of its people. And that is true, overwhelmingly true. But here is the mystery. How did some West African states grow richer during the same period in which millions were being taken from their lands? How did kingdoms like Dahomey, Asante, Oyo, and powerful coastal merchant elites turn the horror of the slave trade into military expansion, political dominance, increases in wealth, control over regional commerce, and transformations in state power? And why, despite these financial gains, did many of these same kingdoms later collapse, weaken, or fall behind economically? The answers reveal one of history's most complicated stories. A story where profit intertwined with tragedy, where short-term gains concealed long-term destruction, and where the financial incentives of West African rulers intersected with global markets in ways still felt today. This is the story of how West Africa gained financially during the transatlantic slave trade, and how those gains came at a devastating price. Let's begin. West Africa before the slave trade. Before European ships arrived in the 15th century, West Africa already had powerful states, sophisticated tax systems, dense trade networks, extensive markets, and experienced merchant classes. From the Sahelian empires of Mali and Songhai to forest kingdoms like Benin and Akan states, West Africa was woven into Saharan trade routes, regional gold markets, local agricultural surplus systems, and rising urban centers. In fact, West Africa was one of the wealthiest regions on Earth during certain historical periods. Gold from West Africa helped finance Islamic empires, Mediterranean states, early European economies. So, when Europeans arrived seeking gold, ivory, and later humans, they encountered well-established economic powers, not passive societies. And here lies the twist. The transatlantic slave trade did not create West African economic sophistication, it hijacked it. European demand for enslaved labor collided with West African political systems, transforming existing structures into engines of extraction. And this collision reshaped everything. How the trade began and why West African elites participated. The arrival of European demand. When Portugal reached the West African coast in the 1400s, their initial interest was gold. But soon they realized something else. African leaders and merchants were already trading captives from local wars, political conflicts, and raids. Captives had long been debt collateral, prisoners of war, agricultural labor, domestic servants, diplomatic leverage. But Europeans introduced something new. A global market that valued human beings far more than any local market ever had. A local captive who might have had modest utility within a kingdom was suddenly worth guns, gunpowder, textiles, metal bars, alcohol, luxury goods. In economic terms, demand exploded. West African rulers responded like any economically rational actors within their own political realities. They supplied. Why some West African elites chose to participate. It is critical to understand. Most West Africans did not profit. Most were devastated. But certain groups gained financially. Kings and royal courts, military leaders, merchant households, coastal intermediaries, religious elites, war captains, local aristocracies. Why did they participate? Reason number 1, strengthening state power. Guns obtained through the trade allowed kingdoms to expand territory, suppress rivals, centralize authority, eliminate political opposition. This created a self-reinforcing cycle. More guns, more wars, more captives, more trade, more guns. Reason number 2, revenue and luxury goods. Rulers used wealth from the trade to expand palaces, fund bureaucracies, strengthen armies, acquire foreign luxury items, buy European technology, enhanced status within their courts. European goods became symbols of power. Controlling access to these goods meant controlling political legitimacy. Reason number 3, control of trade routes. Dominating the slave trade allowed West African elites to impose taxes, monopolize key ports, regulate markets, determine who could trade, extract tolls and customs duties. The result? An entire political economy built around controlling the flow of captives and European goods. How wealth accumulated and who benefited. Case Study 1. The Asante Empire, modern Ghana. Asante rose in the late 1600s through gold wealth. But by the 1700s, the slave trade became a supplemental, and eventually essential, part of their economy. Asante leaders benefited financially through taxes on slave routes, levies on merchant caravans, control of northern supply lines, custom duties imposed on Europeans, revenue from war captives. Asante did not primarily export their own citizens. They exported war captives taken from rival states. Their wealth was used to build administrative systems, create one of West Africa's most powerful armies, centralize political authority around the Golden Stool, expand trade networks across forest and savanna regions. Case Study 2. The Dahomey Kingdom, modern Benin. Dahomey built its economy almost entirely around the slave trade. Its rulers created annual military campaigns, hunting wars, a militarized female regiment, the Agoji, a state-controlled monopoly over slave exports, direct negotiations with European traders, taxes on every enslaved person transported through their domain. Financial gains were used to build elaborate palaces, maintain standing armies, develop regional control, establish a centralized tax system, finance court rituals and festivals. Dahomey became one of the best documented West African examples of a kingdom that economically expanded through slave trade revenue. Case Study 3. The Oyo Empire, modern Nigeria. Oyo benefited through controlling inland trade routes, selling war captives from northern campaigns, taxing coastal Yoruba ports, dominating regional markets using cavalry armies, managing a complex tributary system that funneled wealth to the capital. European demand for slaves helped Oyo maintain political dominance, until the system eventually backfired. Case Study 4. Coastal intermediaries and merchant families. Along the coast, powerful merchant families gained enormous wealth. These included groups in Emo, Fandi states, Ga coastal towns, Ija trading communities, parts of Senegambia, Sierra Leone estuaries. They earned money by housing European traders, acting as brokers, controlling port access, transporting captives, imposing local taxes, managing markets. Some merchant houses grew so wealthy that European traders depended on them more than the other way around. When short-term gains created long-term instability, while kings and merchants profited, the larger region experienced mounting instability. 1. Militarization. The influx of firearms transformed political dynamics. More guns led to more wars, more raids, more political coups, destabilization of smaller states, increased kidnapping for profit, heightened insecurity. A kingdom's survival now depended on participating in the trade that was destabilizing it. A paradox with no escape. 2. Dependency on slave revenue. Many states shifted from diverse economic systems, concentrated slave-dependent economies. This made them vulnerable. When the trade slowed or shifted, their political structures weakened. This happened to Oyo, Dahomey, Bonny, several Akan states, coastal Ga and Fandi communities, smaller polities in Senegambia. 3. Collapse of regional agriculture. As wars increased, agriculture suffered. The regions that profited often depended on importing food, raiding other regions for resources, shifting labor away from farming, relying on European goods instead of local production. Short-term profit replaced long-term sustainability. 4. Internal political struggles. Many kingdoms experienced power struggles over control of trade routes, succession crises, Battles between war captains and royal courts. Tensions between inland and coastal elites. Rebellions fueled by access to European weapons. The slave trade created wealth for some but instability for all. What happened when the trade ended? When the transatlantic slave trade declined in the early 1800s and was abolished by the mid-1800s, the financial foundation of many West African states collapsed. 1. Economic disruption. States that depended on slave revenue struggled to replace it. Examples: Dahomey suffered deep financial decline. Oyo collapsed into civil wars. Asante shifted to palm oil but lost regional dominance. Smaller trading states disappeared. The abrupt end left economies scrambling. 2. Weakened states vulnerable to colonization. European colonization surged soon after abolition. The weakened political structures, created partly by slave trade dependency, made it easier for European powers to conquer. Asante, Dahomey, Benin, Yoruba states, Senegambia polities. European colonization was not caused by West Africa's participation in the slave trade, but slave trade destabilization made conquest easier. 3. Loss of human capital. The most devastating effect, across all states, was the enormous demographic loss. Millions of people, farmers, craft workers, soldiers, scholars, traders, community builders, were removed from West Africa. The region lost generations of potential innovation, productivity, and economic development. The long-term consequences dwarfed the short-term gains. Attempts to rebuild economies after the slave trade. When the slave trade ended, West African states attempted alternatives. Attempt number 1, palm oil exports. Coastal states tried replacing slaves with palm oil. Palm oil became a global industrial lubricant, a soap ingredient, an export to Britain's factories. But shifting from human export to agricultural export required stable farming, large labor forces, investment in land, peaceful conditions. Many regions, still recovering from decades of war, struggled to transition smoothly. Attempt number 2, cash crop economies. Asante Yoruba states, Senegal and Sierra Leone embraced kola nut, cocoa, groundnuts, rubber, cotton. These new markets created wealth but also deepened dependence on European-controlled global trade. Attempt number 3, political reforms. Some states attempted to reduce militarism, build civil administrations, shift focuses to internal development, establish new legal systems, limit the power of war captains. But reforms were slow and often came too late. Attempt number 4, negotiating with European powers. Some rulers attempted diplomacy to preserve autonomy. But the political fragmentation caused by centuries of slave trade militarization weakened their position. Modern parallels, shocking data and repeating patterns. Parallel number 1, resource dependency. Just as some West African states became dependent on slave revenue, today many countries, across Africa and beyond, depend on minerals, cocoa, cobalt, gold, timber. Same pattern, high dependency on a single export, vulnerability to global price shifts. Parallel number 2, external market pressure. European demand shaped the slave trade. Today, global commodity prices, multinational corporations, foreign investment, IMF policies, geopolitical competition, shape African economies. External demand still affects internal stability. Parallel number 3, short-term gains versus long-term costs. The slave trade offered quick wealth but long-term decline. Today, rapid extraction industries sometimes produce environmental degradation, social disruption, loss of sustainable industries. The trade-offs look eerily familiar. Parallel number 4, elites benefiting more than the general population. As kings, merchants, and military leaders once benefited disproportionately, today inequality often mirrors that pattern. Small elites benefit. Broader populations see limited gains. Long-term growth remains uneven. History doesn't repeat, but it echoes. 3 key takeaways. Takeaway number 1, wealth was real, but uneven and costly. Some West African elites profited from the slave trade, but these gains were limited to elites, politically destabilizing, economically narrow, ultimately unsustainable, devastating in the long term. Takeaway number 2. Participation occurred within complex realities. West African states did not create the global demand for slaves. They responded to pressures from European guns, global markets, internal rivalries. Their participation was shaped by the political and economic constraints of their time, not by moral endorsement of the trade. Takeaway number 3. The legacy still shapes modern Africa. The demographic, political, and economic consequences continue to influence state boundaries, ethnic conflict, development patterns, global trade relations, geopolitical vulnerabilities. Understanding the past explains the present. History rarely offers clean narratives. The story of West Africa and the transatlantic slave trade is uncomfortable because it reveals a truth. Even in the face of unimaginable tragedy, systems of power can produce winners and losers, and short-term gains often hide long-term destruction. Today, as nations chase immediate profits through resource exports or political alliances, the same question looms. Are we building sustainable futures, or repeating old patterns with new names? If you want to understand the hidden economic forces shaping African history, and how centuries-old systems still influence today's global markets, subscribe to World Financial Mysteries. Like the video, share it, and join us as we uncover the stories the textbooks leave out. Because to understand where Africa is going, we must confront the financial truths of where it has been.